over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am hopefully one of many, many people to say to you today that we are glad that you are here, that you chose to take a part of your Sunday, spend it right here with us at Five Rivers Church, and we hope that maybe something will impact you, and maybe you'll want to come back and be with us again sometime in the future. I have to tell you something a little funny. We were in our pre-service huddle where we have this short meeting to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page in the mornings, and Tracy had mentioned that he'd had an epic failure last week and forgot to dismiss the junior and senior high kids before he spoke. And we all reminded him, Tracy, that's not really an epic failure. It would only be epic if as you were coming up, you pulled to knock something over on the stage. That would be an epic failure. And so as I was walking off the stage and pulled my microphone stand over, I looked at Tracy and said, epic failure. That is what an epic failure looks like. So before Tracy got the chance to do that next week, I thought I would go ahead and do it this week. But man, we are so glad that you are here. If you missed last week's sermon, I'm going to talk a lot about some of the concepts that were covered in that sermon last week. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I'm going to encourage you at some time next week or whenever you can make time to do it, go back and give it a listen. You can find it on our YouTube channel, Five Rivers Church, and it's called Expectations. And it just kind of sets the stage for kind of what we're going to talk about this morning. There's some good stuff in there. So when you have time, make sure you go out there and check it out. If you want to follow along with us this morning, and you're not what you might call a regular attender here at Five Rivers, if you don't have our church app, you can use your phone. You can grab a picture of this QR code on the screen behind me, and you can follow along in our notes this morning. There's some information in there that might be helpful to you later on. There's all the scriptures we'll be reading this morning are there. So if you want to, I encourage you to snap a pic of that. If you are a regular attender here and you have the church app, take the app out, go ahead and open to the homepage. Click on that current series tab. You'll see a tab for today's notes, June. I'm trying to get ahead of myself. June the 23rd, and you can follow along that way as well. If you have a paper Bible, where are my paper Bible people? How many of you have paper Bibles? If you have a paper Bible, there they are. Go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 20, because we will be reading from Matthew chapter 20 here in just a moment. But last week, Tracy shared with us the parable of the workers in the vineyard. And if you were not here for that, I just want to recap real quick. There were a group of people who were approached by a landowner who owned a vineyard, and he said, I want you to come and work for me, and I'll pay you a denarius for coming and working for the day. And they said, sure, we'll do that. And then he went out later and found some other workers, and he said, come and work in my field, and I'll give you a fair wage. And then he went out again and again, and he does this, and he gets all these people to come and work in his vineyard. And then at the end of the day, he goes to the people who were hired last, and he gave them, in front of all the other people, a denarius for their efforts. And then, of course, the people who were hired first saw these people get a denarius, and they thought, oh, we must be getting more than that because we worked all day. The landowner gets to them, gives them also a denarius, and they are not super excited because they worked all day, as they put it, in the heat of the day, in the heat of the sun. And you have made those who came last equal to us. And the landowner basically says, and? Right? It's my money. I can do with it what I want. And I did say to you that I would give you a denarius for the day, and you said that that was fine. Tracy pointed out that there was some expectation in their minds that because they saw those who were hired last get the amount that they were promised, that they would get more. And this question that we find in this parable, this idea of the landowner saying, are you jealous because they got the same amount, or are you upset that I am generous? And I think the question that we all have to wrestle with today is the question at the heart of this issue: why were they upset, and why do we get upset when those who work less get the same? We serve a generous God who calls us as followers of Christ, if you're a follower of Jesus, to also be generous. So why would we be upset when someone is generous with someone else, with their money, their time, their energy, whatever it might be. Jesus, at the end of this parable, says this. He says, "The last will be first, and the first will be last." And that is the thing that I want you to focus on and remember today. I had some conversations with some of you randomly throughout the week, this past week, and I know a lot of people struggle with the parable of the workers in the vineyard because it's a parable about unfairness, right? It's unfair, is it not? Look, show me your hands if you think it is unfair for someone who worked 1 hour to get the same pay as someone who worked for 10. If you think that's unfair, show me your hands. Some of you are like, no, I'm not doing it because you're going to pick on me. I promise I'm not going to pick on you. It's just unfair, right? Okay, let's just call it like it is. And how many of you like it when things are unfair? You're like, sign me up for the unfair line, right? The unfair line is not really that long. Maybe some of you have waited in the store before and you're in the line and someone they open a new register, right? And some person swoops right in there and taking you, and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. I may or may not have confronted someone in the store about that one time. That may be why that came to my mind. But we don't like this unfairness thing, right? We don't like this idea of unfairness. But what we're going to do is we're not going to focus on the unfairness, okay? We're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on this idea of the last being first and the first being last, because Jesus is going to talk more about it today. So if you have your paper Bible, Matthew chapter 20, we are going to start reading at verse 17. Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, and on the way, he took the 12 aside and said to them, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and on the third day he will be raised to life." So here's where we are. Jesus is the promised Messiah. His followers and his disciples believe this. And so what they believe is happening is Jesus is getting ready to go to Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is like the capital of Israel. It's the place where the Messiah will rebuild his kingdom. He'll take his seat on the throne and he'll rebuild, he'll overthrow Rome, the world will be put back together again, and all will be good. And so they're really looking forward to this moment when Jesus is making his way back to Jerusalem. But Jesus points out, and this is not the first time he said this. If you've been following along with our Matthew series, you know Jesus has talked about this before. Guys, I'm going to be crucified. They're going to kill me. And they just kind of are like, okay, no, Jesus, don't talk like that. They're kind of in denial. Are you all with me? Y'all with me a little bit? Because they know if Jesus dies, well, this whole kingdom idea is kind of poof. It's not going to happen, okay? So Jesus tells them yet again, we're going to Jerusalem, where I'm going to be handed over to the Gentiles, and they're going to flog me and mock me and crucify me. But please take heart, because I will rise again. But there are a couple of things I want you to note here before we move on. Number one, they are going to Jerusalem, but they're not going to Jerusalem for the reason that most of his followers think they're going to Jerusalem, which is what? For Jesus to ascend to his throne and overthrow Rome and put Jerusalem back the way it's supposed to be. Jesus is quite clear. I'm going to Jerusalem to what? To die. And they're, of course, in denial. He also points out that it is the teachers of the law and the priests who are going to condemn him, yes? And who is it that is going to kill him? The Gentiles. So Jesus is pretty clear about there are two groups of people who are going to conspire together to end his life. Is it just the Jews? Is it just the Gentiles? It is both. Both will be equally guilty, and both will be equally open to salvation as a result of what Jesus has come here to do. Are you all with me so far? Good. Sometimes we get this big argument about, well, it was the Jews who killed Jesus. No, it was the Gentiles who killed Jesus. Doesn't matter. Jesus points out it's both. They're both conspiring together to do what needs to be done. We're going to continue reading, because what happens here is Jesus says we're going to go to Jerusalem, and I'm going to die, and then I'm going to be raised back to death. And then this mother of two of the disciples decides to make a request of Jesus in the heat of this deep moment. So the mother, James and John says, the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asks a favor of him. And here's what she says. What is it you want, Jesus asks. Remember that, okay? Remember that she kneels down in front of him and Jesus asks her a question. What does he ask her? What is it that you want? Remember that, okay? She said, grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. Jesus says, I don't think you know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink? And they say, we can. And Jesus says, you know what? You're right. You can and you will. You will drink from the cup I am drinking. And if y'all are familiar with how the story goes later on, okay, what Jesus is basically saying here is, you are going to die just like I'm going to die. Okay? Y'all follow me here? And if you know the story of how his followers, like most of them, were martyred, okay, he says, you're going to drink from the cup. But, he says, to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. This is like one of the first times we find Jesus basically saying, I can't do that. That's not something I have the authority to grant. These places belong, he says, to whom they have been prepared by my Father. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems here like, this is a pretty selfish request. How many of you agree? This mother come to Jesus. He's just said, I'm going to Jerusalem, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to be crucified. And she's like, this sounds like the perfect time to ask for my sons to have a place of authority in his kingdom. Right? I mean, come on. And I think some of us were like, these disciples and these people were whacked out. They have some issues. What kind of people are these? Just look yourself in the mirror sometimes, folk, and think, do you do the same kind of stuff? Yes. You maybe not in front of Jesus, but we all do this, okay? So let's not be too hard on these guys, okay? But I think, I have these thoughts sometimes, I think that this result may just be as a result of Jesus saying something a little bit earlier on in the book of Matthew, okay? Because Jesus says something in Matthew chapter 18, just a few chapters back, and it goes like this, again, I tell you that read this with me, can everybody read this with me? If two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for. Now let's stop there. These two guys' mom has talked to them ahead of time. If you've ever seen The Chosen, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but they do really well with this in The Chosen, okay? She tries to plant the seed in them to ask Jesus, so they kind of like take an interesting hybrid approach. There's another book in the Bible, another gospel that says that the two sons come and they ask Jesus this. It doesn't really matter. The point is that this question is asked, and it could be in response to Jesus telling them, hey, if two of you agree on anything and you ask me for it, what does he say he will do? It will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Now, if you had heard Jesus say those words, and you were talking to your brother one night, and you thought, hey, somebody's going to have to sit at Jesus' right and his left in the kingdom, it might as well be us. Right? Why wouldn't it be us? We followed Jesus. We've sacrificed a lot. Those other disciples are a bunch of losers anyway. They're not as good as we are. We should be the two that sit on his right and his left. Definitely not Peter. Right, just kidding. Just kidding. But it could be that this request that the sons of Zebedee, anyway, that their mother makes is just based on this. Like, hey, if you agree, just ask me for it. And I think it's important to note that Jesus is so quick to point out that they don't really understand what they're asking for. They don't know what they're asking for. They don't understand when they say the right and the left, what they're really asking. And so what I want to do, instead of getting all hard on them, is I want us to catch what could be the more important part of this story and why Matthew has included it here as Jesus is getting ready to go to Jerusalem. We're going to read verse 24 where it says, when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers, which means when the rest of the disciples heard, they were not happy. Right? Because how many of you would be happy? Right? Let's say 10 of you have been following Jesus around for 3 years. You've sacrificed everything. You sleep on the ground. You go without food. You're just sacrificing, working hard. And 2 of you think that they're so much better than everyone else that they should sit on Jesus' right and his left. They're indignant. They're irritated. They're upset. And so Jesus steps in. And it says in verse 25 that Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. He goes on to say, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus has just taught this parable of the workers in the vineyard. And he has said, in order to be first, you must be last, and last first. But it does not seem that the disciples have fully grasped what Jesus is saying. Now, if you weren't here last week, one of the things that we talked about in relation to this parable of the workers in the vineyard, that Jesus is likely talking to the Jews about the idea that the Gentile people who are not Jewish and who have not endured years and years of bondage and slavery, that they are going to have access to the kingdom in the same way the Jews will. Jesus is not trying to tell them that they should all go out and work in the fields and all get the same amount of money. He uses it as an example. So for all of you who got hung up on that and you can't make it past that, I want you to focus on this. This idea that Jesus did not come just for the Jews, but he came for the non-Jewish people as well. And this is something the Jews struggled with. So Jesus, when he talks about how he's going to be handed over, who does he say will ultimately kill him? Is it the Jews that will ultimately kill him? It's the Gentiles. The Jews are going to conspire and find him guilty and condemn him, but then they're going to give him to the Gentiles who are going to kill him. So Jesus seems to be going to great lengths here to use Gentile leadership and authority and structure to point out, yet again, a clear distinction between kingdom and empire. For those of you who are newer to Five Rivers Church, you've not heard us use these phrases before. Kingdom is what we're talking about when we talk about following God's will and his plan, trusting the story as we say it. An empire is what we call like man left to his own devices, the best that he can do with his own structure apart from God. That's the differences between empire and kingdom. And so when we talk about Gentile leadership structure, like he says here, you know that the Gentiles lord over you and they want authority over you. It's how their leadership structure works. How many of you have a leadership structure similar to that in the places where you work? Right? There's authority and there are people who lord over you and they tell you what to do and how to do it, and if you don't do it that way, well, you can go find a job somewhere else, right? You see, it's not that Jesus is saying it's bad necessarily, but what Jesus is trying to do is say, in my kingdom, it's not going to work this way. You think that sitting at my right or my left is going to give you a position of power and authority, and I'm here to tell you, you're not getting it. You're misunderstanding it. In my kingdom, Jesus is saying, it's not about greatness being bestowed on you by position because you're seated at my right or my left or the right or the left of the king, and as such you lord over those who are under you. Jesus is like, this is how it works in empire, not in kingdom. So the disciples, it seems clear, are thinking that when Jesus goes to Jerusalem and he sets up this kingdom, somebody's going to be at his right and his left, and those people are going to have a whole lot of authority. They're going to have really nice quarters to sleep in, and they're going to have lots of wealth and money and power and authority, and they've sacrificed a lot to get that, right? Remember just a few weeks ago, we talked about how the disciples, Peter in particular, said, Jesus, we've left everything to follow you. What is going to be left for us? And here we find them saying, hey, put me at your right or your left. And now Jesus is like, guys, you're just not getting it. Not only is my kingdom not going to be set up like the leadership in empire, but if you want to be great in kingdom, what do you have to do? Serve others. Greatness in my kingdom doesn't come because you sit on my right or my left. Greatness in the kingdom of heaven means following the king. And what did the king come to do? The king, Jesus says, I have come to do what? To serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. As I serve, so should you. and my scriptures are wrong, apparently, in the rest of, because it's going back to verse 24, and it should go to a different verse, but it doesn't. So I'm just going to have to wing it because they're not right in there. So those of you who have your paper Bibles, we should be now at verse 29. I don't have those verses in front of me. Wow, you talk about epic failure today. So verses 29, I believe, through 34 is where Jesus is encountering some blind men on the road, right? Jesus is leaving Jericho, is that correct? Am I correct? Okay. And as they're leaving, I'm going to paraphrase here. You can read it along. Maybe it's right in YouVersion. Is anybody following YouVersion? Is it correct in YouVersion? Oh, good. It's not a total failure then. So I'll paraphrase as we go along. As they're leaving Jericho, they're walking along, and they come across two blind men who are shouting, "Lord, Son of David, save us," right? And the Bible tells us that the crowds tell them to essentially shut up. Be quiet, they say. And then they just get all the more loud, and they continue to shout over them, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." And Jesus is moved by this, and he says to them, "What is it that you want me to do for you?" Now, have we heard a statement like that to this morning? We did, didn't we? Someone comes to Jesus and kneels before him and says, "Jesus," and he says, "What can I do for you?" And now we have these blind men, and Jesus is standing in front of them, and he says, "What is it that I can do for you?" And what do they say in response? "We want our sight back." And Jesus, in this moment, heals them and gives them their sight. I believe it says that he touches them, and immediately they receive their sight. And then what does it say happens when they receive their sight? They follow him. Now, we have already talked about how, let's see if I actually have no, oh man. Did I have that pretty exact? I mean, I was pretty close? Okay, good. Okay. Here's what I want you to pick up on this part, and then I'm going to get ready to close out. Don't get excited because my closing is probably going to be longer than I think. But anyway, Jesus is likely, in my opinion, moved by the idea that these men say to him, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Now, this is important. Maybe you've been following along, maybe you haven't, but Jesus has been questioned quite a bit by the religious leadership about where his authority comes from. Are y'all with me? Maybe you remember this, maybe you don't, but the religious leaders don't buy Jesus as a rabbi or a leader. They don't buy his authority. They don't know where it comes from. They question it all the time. And we have these blind men saying, "Lord, Son of David." Now, what might we discern from this idea of them calling him Son of David? This is a way for these men to draw Jesus as the rightful heir to the throne of David, the Messiah. This is like a statement of faith, not only in who he is, but his authority as Messiah. They're like making a profound statement here. Lord, Son of David, this is like a big deal. And anybody who's listening, that's a religious leader or someone who's trying to spy on Jesus, when they hear somebody call him Son of David and he doesn't correct them, this is a major problem for Jesus. But this is a statement of faith. And like we see so many times in the gospel stories, Jesus responds when people have what? Faith. Your faith has made you whole. Your faith has healed you. Your faith has made you clean. Faith, 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 over and over and over and over again. But I think there's something more going on here in this part of the story, and the placement of this in this part of the story. Jesus and the crowds are headed to Jerusalem. And again, he's not going there to set up his kingdom, but everybody thinks that he is, and he's going to, in their minds, take their rightful place of authority. The crowd, the disciples, pretty much everyone who's following him, has very little time and energy for a distraction like this one. Jesus is getting ready to do something really important, isn't he? Right? If you're a follower of Jesus, you're like, "Hey, we're going to Jerusalem. Big stuff's getting ready to go down. We're in a hurry. We don't have time for you beggars, you blind people on the side of the road. Shut up. Like we got important business to do, and you're just a distraction. You can't help us anyway, right? What are blind men going to do for the kingdom?" You guys are laughing. But think about that. And then I want you to think about how often do you, in your pursuit of, like John said earlier, in your pursuit of the destination, in your pursuit of the great call that God has on your life, you just move past people who need kingdom. People who need to experience kingdom, the very thing that Jesus came to do. But the pursuit of kingdom becomes more important than bringing kingdom to the people who need it most. And I think that's what we see happening in this story. Jesus is going to do something important. These blind men are a distraction. And so they say, shut up. And Jesus steps in and he says, what can I do for you? We want our sight. Can we have our sight back? He touches them. They get their sight. And what do they do immediately after? They follow Jesus. They start their own pursuit of bringing kingdom. And this time I'm going to close. It is 11:51. Man, I probably got 15 more minutes. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But I don't do this very often. I don't often tell personal stories. But this morning I feel the need to do it. So I'm going to close with something that is hard for me to talk about. Years ago, I read a book by Craig Rochelle called Confessions of a Pastor. Okay? And basically this book was him as a pastor confessing to some of the things that, he has failed in as a pastor. And so this morning, I'm going to do a little bit of that. I'm going to confess to y'all. I'm getting ready to go on vacation, so, I'll give you a week to forget about it before I get back. Just kidding. But, Beth talked earlier about Cindy Green passing away in her sleep on Thursday morning. And I got a call from Bob, and I didn't have my phone on, and I basically had a voicemail. My voicemails get transcribed into emails. And I was reading through my emails that afternoon, and I saw this message, and I read it, and he said, Cindy passed away. And I was like, this has to be some kind of mistake. This doesn't even make any sense. Cindy was just here on Sunday. And so I read it again, and I read it again, and then I just sat there in a moment of just utter disbelief and disappointment and a little bit of anger at myself. So I don't expect all of you to know this, but I'll just go ahead and fill you in. So Cindy fell a few weeks ago. It's been 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and broke her hip. She had to have surgery to repair that. Bob, her husband, called me and left me a message almost a week after it had happened to tell me that she was in the hospital. And he left me this message the very day that I was scheduled to leave town for my niece's wedding up in Bowling Green. And so I was like, well, Bob, I'll talk to Tracy, and we'll have Tracy come because I'm not going to be in town. I'll have Tracy come and see Cindy while she's in the hospital. And so Tracy did make it over there to see Cindy, and then she went to a rehab facility after her surgery. Now, as it just so happens, I have been taking time off this summer and doing things and been busy. So right as I was coming back from vacation, Cindy was being released from the rehab facility. And I had a day on Thursday when I came back that I thought, I'm going to go see Cindy at the rehab facility, and I didn't do it. And the reason I didn't do it was because I had more important things to do. Now, I know some of you are looking at me like, Brian, and I don't mean for any of you to hear that the way it sounds, but that's the way it felt in my mind. I'd been gone for a week. I had a lot of stuff to catch up on. I had a lot of things happening on Sunday, and I didn't have time. And I was like, well, Tracy's already been over there to see her. It's no big deal. And so I didn't go. And I didn't go. And I didn't go. Because we always buy into this idea that we always have more time to do stuff, right? I can't go today, I'll just go tomorrow. And sometimes, my pursuit of building this idea of kingdom becomes more important than the people who kingdom is supposed to touch and impact. And so I never made it over to see Cindy at the hospital or at the rehab facility. Now, for those of you who don't know about Cindy's life, Cindy, when she was younger, was beaten almost to death by her ex-husband. And she spent 3 weeks in a coma. When she came out of that coma, she was severely brain damaged. Cindy had a small child, a son, who she had to give up for adoption. She was able to continue to have a relationship somewhat and see him throughout her life, but she wasn't even able to have her own child because she didn't have the facilities to be able to take care of him. And so Cindy's life as a result of somebody beating her nearly to death, was just completely, utterly, and totally turned upside down. Cindy would sing at the top of her lungs here in this congregation, in this building back here. Cindy, there were no pretenses about her. She just was who she was. She was honest. She was transparent. But here's the thing. So many times in life, Cindy is the blind person who was alongside the road as the crowds were passing by, doing something more important. And the people who need kingdom the most sometimes get overlooked by those of us who are tasked with bringing kingdom, because we are so focused on the destination that we forget the journey and the importance of who we meet along the way. And if you think that I, as a pastor, am immune to that, I just want you to know I am not. And so the first thing I remembered when I read that message was, I didn't go and see Cindy. And Cindy, look, I'm not patting myself on the back here, but anybody, if you ask Cindy who her favorite pastor was, it was me. She came to Kettering Church for a long time, and when my father-in-law was here, she would tell him he got an F every time he'd preach. You know, I don't know what it was, folks. I don't know. I don't know why Cindy thought I was her favorite pastor. But her favorite pastor let her down. Her favorite pastor failed her at the time when she needed it most. And if you don't think I don't live with that daily right now, I do. I live with that daily because I allowed the destination, the idea of kingdom, to be more important than bringing kingdom to the people who needed it most. Cindy needed me to come and see her in that rehab facility, and I didn't go. I thought I had more time. I thought other things I was doing were more important. And what I want you all to think about today as we continue to make our way through Matthew is there is a whole world of people out there who need to experience kingdom. And there are a whole lot of people in churches in America who are so focused on heaven, we're so focused on our idea of kingdom, that we miss the people who need kingdom every single day. And I'm going to get all controversial this morning because I can. What time is it? I got 3 minutes. There are people who may be hard for you, people who you disagree with, people who live lifestyles that are uncomfortable for you. And they need to experience the love and the compassion and the grace of kingdom. And we have the opportunity to take that and bring that to them if we will allow ourselves to just do it. So many people you encounter every day need to experience the love of Jesus through kingdom. And where are we? I'm holding myself accountable. I get holed up in my office, or I get holed up in here working on music, or I get holed up doing all kinds of things. And in the moments when the people who need kingdom need me, I need to make sure that I'm in a headspace to step in and meet them and love on them where they are. That my imaginary idea of heaven, there it is, I said it again for all of you who missed it the first time. My idea of what heaven might look like becomes so important to me that I miss the moments to bring kingdom every day, right here and right now. So the person who is in your life who's a raging liberal and you can't stand to look at them because you are a diehard conservative or vice versa, they may need you to bring kingdom, but you might be too focused on this other stuff. So whether they're liberal or conservative, who cares? They need kingdom, folks. Whether they're gay or they're straight, whether they're cisgendered or transgendered, whatever they are, folks, they need us to be loving on them with kingdom. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say and do. But my goodness, how many chances are you missing to bring kingdom because you're so focused on your own idea, your own imagined view of what heaven or kingdom is going to be like. Do not allow yourself, like I have allowed myself, to become so focused on the task of kingdom, to miss opportunities, to bring kingdom, to love people, where they are, who they are, how they are, when they are. Let them see Jesus through you. And maybe, just maybe, they will like what they see, and they'll start wanting to know more and follow him themselves. Would you pray with me, Heavenly Father? Lord God, today I pray that each and every one of us will stop for a moment and think about what it means to actively partner with Christ to bring kingdom every day. In small ways, to just show love. When people need something, we may not be able to give them their sight, but Lord, when they need something, that we can be there to support them, to show them love and compassion and dignity and grace. Lord, may we not become so focused on the trip to Jerusalem that we forget the importance of the people that we meet along the way. Lord, as a church, as individuals who make up your church, Lord, may we put ourselves in that headspace where we think about those things. Lord, for me personally, may you help me when I get so focused on the task to step back and remember the importance of the people who need to experience kingdom as I partner with you and you live through me to allow them to experience that kingdom. I ask this in your name today. Amen. Thank you for being here. I hope this wasn't too deep for all of you, and hopefully you'll come back next week. Tracy will be sharing next week. God bless you. Have a great week, and we'll see you all next time.